Hello creepy crew, and welcome back. And if you're new here, this is a creepy content channel, so if that's something that you like, please remember to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about it. Personally, I'm really excited to get into today's episode. Growing up in middle school and in high school, around this time of year, we used to read the short creepy stories by Edgar Allan Poe. But if you didn't know, there was actually some eerie and creepy details surrounding his life that I wanted to go over with you guys. For those of you who don't know who Edgar Allan Poe was, he was a writer, poet, and he was well known for his short stories, novels, and poems that were full of darkness and horror. He was the Stephen King of his time. I mean, he was so great. Like, I was a big fan, and I used to get so excited around October when we were able to read his short stories. Oh, it definitely gave me that creepy feel, but I love horror movies and I love creepy stuff. So of course, I had to fit Edgar Allan Poe in my channel. Edgar Allan Poe was born January 19th in 1809, and both of his parents were like poor. His dad's name was David and his mom's name was Elizabeth Poe. They were both traveling actors trying to make a living, and they both passed away days apart from each other of tuberculosis. Moving forward, Edgar was taken in but never officially adopted by, but he was taken in by a wealthy couple by the name of John and Frances Allen. And it was said at the age of 3 years old, that was when Edgar had taken on the name Allan and became officially Edgar Allan Poe at the age of 3 from his, I would say, caregivers, since they never really adopted him, or like guardians. When Edgar turned 20 years old, his two guardians had both also passed away the same exact way that his biological parents had died. They both suffered from tuberculosis. And moving forward into Edgar Allan Poe's life, it literally seems like every person he loved or was inspired by had died tragic deaths. They say that due to all of the death that surrounded him and the heartache that surrounded him, he was a very dark and disturbed person. And he was, a lot of his stories were based on his personal experiences, or not fully, but I mean, he was very creative, but you never really know. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe's background and what molded his dark mind, let's get into some of the creepy, eerie details that surrounded his life. In 1838, Edgar Allan Poe wrote a novel called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. That book was about cannibalism, and it was about a cruise ship of 4 crewmen who ended up in a shipwreck, and they were running out of supplies to survive. So one of the characters in the book was named Richard Parker, and Richard Parker tells the crewmen that they should draw straws and decide which of the men would be sacrificed and eaten in order to survive. So they start drawing the straws, and Richard Parker picks up the short straw. So since he picked up the short straw, he was then stabbed and eaten to death by the crewmen. Well, it turns out that that novel ended up happening in real life, and it was pretty terrifying. 45 years later, in 1884, a small yacht by the name of, I believe it's pronounced Mignonet or Mononet. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, but it was leaving from England to Australia, and it was said that that yacht was not meant to travel a trip that long, so it ended up leading the ship to wreck, and the 4 crewmen on that ship got away in a lifeboat, and they were running out of supplies, and they decided to sacrifice one of the weakest and illest members on that boat. And the victim's name was Richard Parker, just like the novel. So for many years later, people thought that Edgar Allan Poe's book was a prediction, but people like me wondered if maybe there was something more. I always wondered if maybe he was a spiritual person, or if maybe he ever experienced any kind of like paranormal experiences, especially with all the creepy and horrifying things he would write about. I really feel like every part of this man's life was really dark and chilling, to say the least. And even the things that he left behind, his novels, his stories, his books, and things that have happened in his life, even that weird prediction, it was very strange. Even moments leading to his death were, till this day, still a mystery. People say that 4 days prior to his death, he was experiencing what people said was horrifying hallucinations, and he was very delirious until the day that he was found in a ditch. A man said that he was, doing his regular errands, and he walked upon a man laying in a ditch wearing clothes that didn't belong to him, so I'm guessing they didn't fit properly or something like that. Was laying in that ditch, and he kept saying the name Reynolds, like he kept shouting the name Reynolds. Well, they took him to a local hospital, and he ended up being going unconscious and passing away on October 7th. But yeah, till this day it remains a mystery as to why he was going through all those horrific hallucinations, and why he was even saying the name Reynolds, and whose clothes did those belong to. I don't know, something so strange about a man who was so famous for writing dark, horribly creepy stories, and dying in the same way that he wrote about himself. It's just so strange. Even after his death, things were weird. Only 7 people attended his funeral, and an attendee that was there, and I quote, stated that the funeral was very cold-blooded and un-Christian-like. I don't know. Things are just very strange. And after the funeral was over, an incident happened where Edgar Allan Poe's tombstone was crushed in a train wreck that happened near his grave, the graveyard where he was buried. And I just think it's very weird, all the death and everything that surrounded his life, and then after he died, his tombstone ended up being crushed. A part of me, if curses were a thing, I don't know. I hate to say it. I love Edgar Allan Poe. Could there have been a possibility that maybe he was cursed? Because I don't know how to explain it. His biological parents died. His guardians died. His first wife, who he was married to for 8 years, died. His older brother, Henry, who was his biggest inspiration for his poetry and all of that, died. And then he died in a very mysterious and weird way. And then they even said that after he died, days after he died, his cat died. After he was finally laid to rest, his tombstone was crushed in a crazy incident. And then after that, people say, now there's no proof to this last part, but people say that Edgar Allan Poe died during a time where body snatching was actually a thing. People were going and stealing from people's graves, and they were stealing their bodies and selling them for money to medical studies. People say that Edgar Allan Poe's body was stolen either for medical purposes or weird personal experiences. It was definitely giving the feeling of Ed Gein. So yeah, I don't know. There was a whole bunch of weird coincidences around Edgar Allan Poe, but I definitely had to talk about it, especially since we're in the month of October, and Edgar Allan Poe is the best horror story writer there is. At least in my opinion anyway. Thank you so much for watching this episode with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.